Hello everyone and welcome to the second audiobook video, and I'm here today with a special guest, Tim Dunford from the Master Fate channel.
How you doing?
And he will be helping me with this second audiobook video. We are on the second chapter of Francis of the Filth. If you'd like to buy yourself a copy of it, I'll put a link in the description down below so you guys can buy it for yourself on Amazon or anything else. And without further ado,
Let's begin.
Yeah. Chapter 2. All children except one grow up, and all children except one are born of woman. In the spring of 1945, a fetus-like infant was retrieved from their open-air sewer beneath a public toilet in the slum of the Lorong village, or Jakarta. He was named Franciscus, meaning free from filth. And from the first moment of his existence, and in spite of his squalid genus, he demonstrated an unparalleled genius. At first was a moment of crying, but then cooing, very shortly followed by a clear linguistic utterances. By the time the authorities arrived, some hours later, he was writing quadratic equations on the wall in his own excrement. Excrement on the walls was nothing new to the locals, and explaining them in Aramaic to the crowd which had gathered.
For the next 2 weeks, he was taken in by a family of 28 running local tempo. They lived over a fresh brown creek with the smell of a pig farm, and there he fed and clothed was loved. Because of his brilliant mind and progressive knowledge, he was quickly treated as a god in the village, and the people would line up with him pet to head, in hope of having knowledge imparted to them. He thrived in the grime of his environment, growing rapidly in stature and intellect, and soon had the appearance of a toddler while engineering sanitation, transport systems, and birth control for the whole community. This way, he was no longer needed to circumcise the woman.
Word quickly spread about Franciscus, and soon the Indonesian military were his doorstep. Would be if the temple had a doorstep. There was much wailing and moaning as the young prodigy was ripped from their arms, and a torrent of semi-naked bodies followed along the vehicles as they departed, banging on the windows and doors, begging them to return him to them. Their hopes were never realized. They were gunned down, all of them, the temple family, their neighbors, and all who had come out to protest. Their bodies piled as high as horses' shoulders, for as far as the eye could see. "Saline condemnation!" A soldier yelled at the families. This was not Indonesian. He had the speech impediment.
Franciscus was taken to the top-secret facility deep in the mountains, where, after a brief period of quarantine, so-called experts, though they had never actually seen anything of Francis like before, began to feed him their boisterous curiosity, intellect, and abilities. They were in awe. They began with little golden books and tic-tac-toe, but they before long were working with James Joyce and global thermonuclear warfare. Apart from the odd foray into hentai erotic art, Franciscus adhered strict to the academic and ethical pursuits.
Scientists from all over the world began to hear rumors of this prodigy and would try to arrange secretive visits to Franciscus' cell. There, the lucky few would marvel over the possibilities he brought into the world. Was he a god? They wondered. A mutation? Should he be encouraged or stopped? Their audiences with Franciscus was inevitably inspiring and humbling, and was often coupled with an intoxicating agenda. Despite the highly classified nature of the project, to which Franciscus was now referred, and the isolated location of its facilities, one day several months into operations, a blonde-haired man in a very dark suit turned up, unannounced, at the front gate. He flashed some identification and was escorted into the heart of the complex. There he was introduced to the overseer of the program, looking his Indonesian colleague in the eye with a curious expression that would have him been mistaken for contempt. He removed his spectacles and raised his palm. Heil Hitler!
In the summer of that year, the Pacific War was brought to an end, with 2 cataclysmic explosions. They destroyed everyone and everything for miles around, and left a simmering scorched layer of radiation to last for the ages. The lucky one were those right under the detonation, who were immediately reduced to ashes and outlines etched in concrete. It were those who survived the initial blast who learned the true meaning of suffering. They wandered around aimless, hopeless with melting flesh, groping around near total blindness for help. None came to that which came too late, and there was no need nor means to alleviating their agony.
The torture was not short-lived for years, even decades to come. Those who had been exposed to the radiation suffered numbness, loss of fingernails, blood spots under their skins, tumors, leukemia, kidney and liver dysfunction, and so on. The list of after effects was almost endless, and those who suffered from them, so was the pain. Such widespread and severe affliction hastened at the surrender of the Japanese forces, and with the capitulation of their Axis powers earlier in the year, the ceasing of worldwide hostiles was now complete. For the general populace, exhausted and depleted, it couldn't come soon enough. By a few other nations, alike with great relief and vigour, but not by all.
Not everyone was pleased with either the outcome of a war and of the means of which it had been achieved. There were some who believed that the Axis power still retained the ability and manpower, and most of all the technological savvy, to inflict revolutionary damage on the Allied force, and alter not merely the outcome of war, but both history and future together.
Sonocorp was one such organization, a secretive, privately owned Japanese company based in Okinawa. It was bitterly opposed to the Japanese surrender and continued to work unabated in the technological and ideological and biological warfare. Through the rest of the country labored in poverty, Sonocorp remained flush with funds for its operations. A little-known fact regarding the end of the war in the European theatre concerns the demise of the Führer. In that bunker, Berlin was just... He put the pistol to his temple. Hitler uttered his final words. Give alles zu Sonocorp. Give everything to Sonocorp.
As such, the Okinawan company had available to them near unlimited resources from war loot, and retained communication with its sister allies in Germany and Italy to pursue its goals of supremacy. Given these objectives, one could hardly overstate the joy reverberated along the corridors when they received word that the fatherland, the new resource of immeasurable capacity, had been secured.
And so it was that Franciscus was removed from Indonesia at a very young age and transported to Okinawa, where he was to spend the remainder of his adolescent years. There his name was shortened to Frank because the Japanese seemed incapable of pronouncing Ciscus, part of his name, and was put in a lab working toward various means of Axis domination.
The enigma of this young man grew to about 180 centimeters tall and developed a well-defined body thanks to the chasing monkeys and boars by the lab whenever they escaped, which was often. He would wrestle them to the ground and knock them out, sometimes with the aid of a porcelain stake, a trick he learned from the Slav. He had a shock and thick black hair, which gave him an aura of tremendous vitality. He wore silver wire-rimmed glasses upon the nose, and had more than once identified him as having Jewish ancestry. The association had been vehemently denied, and he always wore the same blue shirt that had never been washed.
Frank's secluded upbringing gave him a peculiar perspective on the world. He tended to see people and events and extremes. He divided folk into creators and consumers, leaders and followers, thinkers and dumbasses, and bullies and their prey. No one really sat in between any of these paradigms. But people were either one or the other, and once they were one, it himself as a consummated creator, leader, thinker, bully in almost any environment he found himself in.
Then there was his voice. Much had been hypothesized about the raspiness of Frank's voice and what came out to be so. Some might assume it just be a purely genetic anomaly. Others are certain it was the result of a bacterial infection caught from any number of animals he was experimenting on. On occasion, Frank told people about it from the swollen thumbtacks after losing a bet at a drunken super. But the truth of the matter is a short stint of Frank's formative years. He took to singing Christian heavy metal, the praise which he quickly grew out of the relief of everyone in the lab and local area. But the constant shrieking and growling took all toll on Frank's virgin vocal cords, and alas, they never fully recovered.
Young Frank had interests and ideals that extended way beyond the walls of the lab. He was fascinated with midgets and aliens and black people in Paris. He found unusual dialects from the Congo, Peru, and the bowels of the Southeast Asia to be particular interest. Rap and opera filled his musical library, and he developed a particular distaste for non-Japanese who attempted to infiltrate Japanese society, professing a knowledge of the culture whilst demonstrating a profound ignorance of it. There were many artisans and thinkers, musicians and poets who inspired him, but none more so than Schrödinger and some guy named Mozart, who down the line would become the ancestor of Fred Durst.
Biologically speaking, Frank himself was, it turned out, an even more mysterious figure than his filthy origins would suggest. Though digit from an Indonesian sewer, DNA testing revealed that he was primarily of Japanese and German extraction. This explains some inherent traits of Frank, like his unstable appetite for takoyaki, sudden bowling in pursuit of Reicho Taisei early in the morning. On the crouch side, Frank would immediately immerse himself in bratwurst diets for weeks on end, finds secret relief in listening to recordings of Papa bands of Munich, and was without any sense of humour yet. Yet there were other genetic markers in his DNA which were unidentified, and it was which these started rumors in the labs and fears amongst his colleagues in the lab.
There was only one man that Frank answered to in the lab, and that was Tatsuba Honda. Honda was a graduate from Tokyo University who excelled in bioengineering. He originally joined the Imperial Army because nurturing the psychopath within. He wanted to create bioweapons to see what happens with them. A quietly spoken man, he was once well built, yet now rather rounded as he approached middle age. He almost became a professional baseball player before the war, primarily because smashing things with a bat was marvelous release for someone who was otherwise extremely reserved. Yet he quit baseball at the last minute because he didn't want to give in to a dirty American tradition. When the war came to its first viable end, Honda was first offered a job at Sonocorp, a position he received with enthusiasm. A graduate was philosophically it. It involved continuing the service to the Emperor, and, in practical terms, it involved destroying things. XD.
His relationship with Frank was simple. In awe of Frank's genius and his mortal failures, his job was to leave Frank alone and do the work that he had been specifically employed to do, and to neither question neither the Germans nor the Japanese border Suncorp about it. In this sense, Honda was the perfect supervisor for Frank, loyal without ethics, nationalistic yet without any sense of resilience, and brilliant without any desire to use it for the greater good.
There were 15 other employees in the lab to clean and to perform mundane duties, but to Frank, they were all faceless dirges, as boring as a feminist at a dinner party. about as funny as a fart in the church. Yet there was one presence in that facility who stood out to Frank, and who became very nearly the sole focus of his attention. His name was Ichiro. Ichiro mattered not in the sense that he was important or intelligent or helpful. On the contrary, Ichiro was a useless idiot. He was the very antithesis of Frank, the consuming dumbass follower type who was he was the prey for Frank's inner bully. He was the necessary evil in Frank's small world, and Frank worked him without mind or mercy.
A little contemptuous man with a basketball head and round glasses. He looked like some kind of bootleg Japanese Harry Potter doll, and you'd win a second-rate carnival. He had kicked me written all over his fat poxy face. Simply put, he looked like a fucking retard. Ichiro was Frank's white whipping boy, his dog, his right-hand wiper, and almost every sense of word. Ichiro was Frank's bitch. Would explain why Frank never referred to him by a name, which his mother gave him at story of birth, but called him without exception Bichiro. Whenever Frank needed someone to mop up a spillage, he called for Bichiro. Whenever Frank wanted someone to pick up the pieces of a rat, he would bellow for Bichiro. If he needed a bottle of pissin, Bichiro would hold it at the ready.
Bichiro, hand me the generator. Bichiro, pick up that spleen. Bichiro, stick that knife into the toaster.
Whenever a command, Bichiro would bow and scrape with a voice response with,
My name is Bichiro.
and whenever Frank did defecate, he would wash his towel and flush away and say,
Goodbye, Bichiro.
The laboratory itself was like no other. A perfectly square grey building. It looked like a run-down Japanese public school. There was nothing in its design to please or inspire, save a few palm trees which grew on the boundaries of the property. Rising up behind it was a mountain range covered in Jurassic vegetation and still unclassified fauna. It teemed with monkeys, boar, and habu snakes. Yet, most of its natural resources remained undiscovered. The building contained 3 floors, with the top 4 at the treetop height. Vines and other vegetation ran along the outside of the wall of the lab, weaving in and out of the windows and ventilation systems, which no longer worked. The sultry air was a perfect incubator for all this foliage, and a common source of fatigue amongst the employees on any given afternoon.
The top floor was all Frank's. He was given unfettered access to complete his tasks. It contained line after line of computers and various other experiment and equipment, most of which none other than Frank knew how to operate. But Frank was an intellect itself, was fast approaching singularity, ran with all but ease and distinction. His preferred fields of research were diverse, including bacteriology, horology, pharmacology, biochemistry, cosmology, endocrinology, special ecology, hematology, and mycology. The designer it meant more to Frank than any other. It was radiobiology, but it is the study of the reaction of ionizing radiation on living things.
As such, the lab was strewn with cages, containing, or which contained, animals of all sizes and kinds. Primates, birds, reptiles, amphibians, insects were all loved equally for their willingness to serve a greater good. Presently a small newt sat gingerly in the corner of a clear container, occasionally looking up at Frank as its god, or scratching its chest. And then there were the rats. Frank hated the rats with a passion, and found a great pleasure in reserving his most terrifying experiments for them. Some moved about in their confinement with no concern, while others were no longer able to, and some were no more than organs or appendages on the table.
More than one occasion, Frank would tie a rat to 3 or 4 pigeons and release them into the skies. The pigeon would fly off in different directions, tugging the rat back and forth in mid-air. The rat would be writhing and screaming. The birds would be scared to death if the noise of a rat was making them fly even harder, which made the rat's screams reach further pit, and so the circus would just go till it all came to a grisly demise. Frank would just shrug and chuckle.
That sounds like a weekend plan.
That isn't.
These episodes marked a beginning. Indeed, the socially repressive lab life began to take its toll on Frank. He would drink copious amounts of beer and then abuse the animals in the lab for what he claimed was a node. He would disappear for hours on end in the evenings to go to dog fights, cockfights, bullfights, and midget boxing. He would drunkenly harass the hookers in the red light district, yelling, "I got Molly, I got white," and "Gang, gang, free my nigga, goo whoop," while being dragged away by the police and or the off-base US military. In short, while Frank was a genius and a biological phenomena, his environment was making him filthy.
Oh no.
Well, yes.
Yeah, but greater change was from within. Frank had been pouring his heart into soul and radiology, and all the while unwittingly he poured red biology into genetic vulnerabilities. The interaction of radiation of the unknown genetic markers in Frank's DNA brought about changes which Frank could never have imagined. Dark changes, menacing changes, changes that reached far further than Frank could ever have imagined. At first it was just aches and pains, but his urine turned orange and began to have hallucinations, sometimes happy, sometimes terrible, always weird. Unaware of these changes, Frank decided to secretly test on himself, certain of how he had some sort of new form, or forms of cancer. It was not without fear then that he laid on a syringe on the table, sterilized his arm with a swab of alcohol, and slapped his skin to build up the vein. And finding the best one, he slipped the needle in and watched the red excess fill the test tube. He threw in a second just in case. Before the blood in his arm had dried, with a simple mix of the testing solution and placed under the microscope. There, to his horror, he watched the nucleic acids behave in a way which he had never seen before. They were wriggling, writhing, and then pulled apart through some sort of self-rejection before completely splitting down the middle, a process which appeared to be repeating ad infinitum. This discovery made cancer look like a common cold. With cancer, the cells multiplied uncontrollably. With Frank, his chromosomes were now multiplying uncontrollably. He was, in effect, So you see,
So you see it too?
Frank asked.
You see the chromosomes multiplying?
Bitro could no longer control his bladder.
My name is Mitchell, my name is Mitchell!
Frank turned away in distress for a moment, but then looked back to his underling and held out a stern finger.
No one hears about this, Bitchero. You got that? No one is to know.
My name is Mitchell.
If anyone at all gets wind of this, I'll stew you up and I'll serve you with fries while you're still breathing.
My name is Mitchell.
Now what are you still doing here? Piss off!
The weasel scampered off with one last.
My name is Mitchell.
Frank diligently took every sampling every morning and evening and kept daily notes of the progress of his condition. When he failed to do so, however, primarily because he just didn't care, would test Bitchero, who had been regularly exposed to the uranium.
Mitchell.
Bring me the cucumber.
He called to him one fine morning.
My name is Mitchell.
Frank looked to his little bolt and held a dripping ephedrine. in his trembling hands. Vitro looked different this morning. He had an aura of greater patheticness, greater nervousness, as though he was expected to be beaten far greater than he had ever been beaten before. Frank enjoyed this normality.
My name...
What?
What?
Said Frank.
Spit it out, boy! My name... What in the name of scat is wrong with you? My name...
And before he could get any more out, his head jerked backward in such a violent manner, the crack of his neck could be heard down to the second floor. With a sound like a branch of a tree breaking, his jaw and mouth ripped apart in such incredible force, the crown of his head began to split open. There was a momentary resistance before Bitcher's entire body from his head down to the base of his torso ripped in two, and a new naked slimy Bitcher emerged, slithering out of what was now a crumbed carcass lying on the floor. Said Frank.
Cool.
Then turned to continue his own testing.
My name is Bitchero.
Said the new Bitcher, identified to the previous one, but still covered in thick slime.
Yeah, I know.
Said Frank.
Now piss off.
This metamorphosis was not a singular event. In fact, Bitcher had fast fell into a natural routine of excruciating death and slime rebirth once a week or so. Frank, more amused than concerned in any way, would take fascination notes each time it happened. His concern remained more for himself. He knew that he and Bitcher were changing, and the only difference was no one really cared about Bitcher. And soon Bitcher had a complete metamorphosis. Frank would tell him to hurry, clean up the mess he had made on the floor, and to create the putrid carcass he had always left behind.
Well, that was the second chapter of Francis the Filth. I would again like to thank my friend here, Tim, from the Master Fate channel, and if you guys want to hear more of me and Tim, yeah, make sure you guys keep an eye out for the next chapter. We'll be reading the third chapter of Francis of the Filth. Again, like I said before at the start, I will leave a link in the description so you guys can buy a copy of Francis of the Filth for yourselves. And also don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter and on Twitch and also on Tumblr and all my social medias. I'll put them in the description below. And also make sure you check out Tim's channel, Master Fate, which I'll also put in the description below. And without further ado, this will be it for now, and see you guys in the future video. Any last words, Tim?
Why me, God?